What is the message that African business leaders would like to take to those G8 meetings and those G20 meetings?
First of all, it would be a tragedy if, because of all that is going on in the world around us, I mean, economically, Africa, in a sense, which has assumed a certain prominence at previous G8 and G20 meetings, is now sidelined, because everybody has to, as it were, focus on how to restructure and get their own economies back on track. Africa does have an awful lot to offer the world in these very difficult times. This is a continent is of almost a billion people, potentially a billion people market, as it were. And so Africa, as it were, which has gone through tremendous change, politically and economically, this is the time that the Western or G20, in its own interest, certainly the G8 in its own interest, ought to give back the kind of recognition and the support which they have pledged at previous G8 meetings. This is not a time to take your foot, as it were, off the pedal. This is a time to re-engage Africa and ensure that working together with Africa, we unravel the tremendous opportunities that we who live on the continent see.
I'd like to get your opinion. A report came out recently by Chatham House here in the UK saying that the key to the economic recovery is the developing world and Africa, and that the West must engage with Africa, must seize the opportunities that Africa provides in order to bring the world out of recession. What are those opportunities in your opinion, and how does that sort of change Africa's role in the global community?
Well, first of all, in terms of, I mean, historically, over the last few years, the 10 years or so, it has been confirmed by independent bodies that the returns that Western companies have received on their investments in Africa have been much higher than they have received in other places in the world. So clearly, even to seem to suggest that even for their own economic reasons, it is better for companies to take opportunities and invest in Africa. Africa is attracting a very small part of the foreign direct investment that comes. We get about 4%, and a large part of it goes to global, and a large part of it goes into natural resources, those with oil and mining and minerals and others. But there are many, many areas which are untouched, many areas where Africa really does offer opportunities for good returns, and why not? That's what business is all about.
Now you...
we are not asking for dependency on aid. We want to win ourselves of that. We want to show the world that we are ready, willing to, as it were, take a self-responsibility for moving our own economies forward. And just do it with us the way you've done it with China, the way we've done it with India, the way you've done it with Brazil. Why not Africa?
Now, Sir Samuel, you for many years, speaking of responsibility, you ran Ashanti Gold rather for many years, an African company run by Africans for Africans, and you did so very successfully. Is there a winning formula? What is sort of your secret formula or your sort of MO?
No, my secret formula was that I was exceptionally privileged to have a wonderful team of people, men and women working for me and with me. And we took advantage of opportunities as the wind of change which was blowing through Africa politically and economically brought in its wake tremendous opportunities. And my team and I made sure we capitalized on those opportunities. If you want to call that a winning formula, that was what it was.
Let's talk about the mining sector, because there's a lot of talk right now, especially in Australia, for example, about levies on mining companies. We know that the royalties and the tax system in Africa is varied from country to country. Is there any indication that we could move towards a slightly more unified system of royalties for the industry as a whole? We have other unified mechanisms like the Transparency Initiative and other things that sort of apply to everybody operating in the industry. What is your take on that? Investors are a little bit anxious given what's coming out of Australia.
I think realistically speaking, it will be difficult for us to harmonize taxes for the mining industry, because let's face it, each country is in competition. Each country which is endowed with mineral resources is in competition with the other for much in their foreign capital. So in a practical sense, one doesn't see that happening soon. However, having said that, I mean, I think it is fair to say that African governments, as indeed Australia is finding out, has not benefited to the extent that they ought to in the windfall which came to companies during the remarkable boom that we saw in commodity prices. And therefore, it is not unreasonable that mining companies themselves would sit down with governments and see how there can be a rearrangement of the relationship to ensure that when the good times are here, the boom times are here, there is equitable sharing of the rent that comes with it. And when the bad times are there too, when you start knocking, as we do, on the doors of governments for them to be more accommodating because we are going through difficult times, then it is reasonable to expect that government will respond, but not wait and only go to governments when the times are bad.